Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating, highly analytical breakdown of a very specific, meticulously documented procedure from Talmudic law. We're going to examine the precise culinary and legal steps required to actually remove blood from meat. You see, this isn't just about cooking. It's about this incredible intersection of strict religious prohibition, kitchen chemistry, and ancient operational protocols. We're looking closely at the texts that define exactly how meat transitions from the butcher's block straight to your dinner table. Okay, let's dive right into this and just quickly glance at our agenda. We're going to cover ridding meat of blood, the mandatory preparation sequence, slaughterhouse versus home preparation, the coarse salt method, and finally, organs that require no salting at all. All right, starting with part 1. To really understand the procedures we'll be exploring, we've got to establish the foundational Torah law, right? And that is the strict, absolute prohibition against the consumption of animal blood. But here's the thing. The Torah establishes the goal, but it leaves a massive, practical question unanswered for the person actually standing in the kitchen. I mean, how do you actually get all the blood out of a piece of raw meat before you cook it? Well, that is exactly where the sages step in. While the prohibition against eating blood is a core Torah law, the exact method for extracting that blood, that's governed by rabbinic decree. Basically, these decrees provide the specific, mandatory operational procedures you need to successfully fulfill the underlying Torah law. It's kind of like thinking of the Torah law as the constitutional principle and the rabbinic decrees as the standard operating procedures required to actually comply with it. And today, we're analyzing those exact procedures.
Moving on to Section 2. Now that we've got that legal framework down, let's transition right into the practical mechanics. We're going to look at the sage Shmuel's foundational rule, which states that meat absolutely requires thorough salting and thorough rinsing in water.
And this brilliantly illustrates the standard operating procedure as taught in a fundamental historical text known as a baraita. It lays out a rigid 3-step process for preparing meat. Step 1, you've got to rinse the meat thoroughly in water. Step 2, salt the meat thoroughly. And step 3, rinse the meat again. It makes sense, right? The first rinse prepares the surface, the salt extracts the blood, and that final rinse washes away all that blood-soaked salt. It's a precise mechanical sequence designed for total extraction.
Okay, Section 3. Now, Tommudic law is rarely without its variables, and let's face it, the kitchen is a super dynamic environment. Just as soon as we establish this baseline rule, we actually encounter a sudden legal wrinkle that seems to totally contradict it.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the visual tension between these two authoritative methods. On one side, we've got Rav Huna's teaching, which dictates a 2-step process. You salt the meat, and then you rinse it in water. But on the other side, we have the Baraita's method that we just looked at. Rinse, salt, then rinse again. That's 3 steps. So this presents a direct conflict in the standard operating procedure. Do you start with a rinse, or do you start with the salt? Well, the texts elegantly resolve this contradiction by introducing the missing variable in the supply chain, and that is the slaughterhouse wash. You see, the texts don't actually disagree at all. They're just describing the meat at completely different stages of its journey. Rav Huna's 2-step method, that's referring to meat that had already received its initial first wash at the slaughterhouse before it even reached the home kitchen. Because the butcher already did step 1, the home cook can just jump right into step 2, salting. The Baraita, on the other hand, is talking about meat that was not washed at the slaughterhouse, which means the home cook has to do the entire 3-step sequence completely from scratch. Moving right along to Section 4, having resolved that sequence of actions, we really need to look at the specific tools required, because the physical properties of the salt itself are absolutely crucial to the success of this whole extraction process.
To really ground this law in its culinary reality, let's look at exactly why coarse salt is uniquely suited for this job. You simply cannot use fine, powdery table salt for this procedure. Fine salt melts way too quickly. If it dissolves into the meat, it ends up marinating it rather than extracting the blood, which defeats the whole purpose. Coarse salt, with its large, thick grains, acts almost like a giant sponge. It sits right there on the surface of the meat and draws the blood out incredibly efficiently without immediately melting into the tissue. So it's this brilliant calculated use of food chemistry to fulfill a strict legal requirement.
And that brings us to a fascinating historical detail about finishing this extraction process. The text notes that Rav Dimi of Nehardea would salt meat with coarse salt, let it do its work, and then he would actively shake the salt off the meat. Now, this shaking action is vital. Think about it. Once the coarse salt has drawn out the blood, those thick grains are now completely saturated with prohibited blood. By physically shaking off that coarse salt, you are actively removing the extracted blood from the meat's surface. That leaves the meat perfectly prepped and ready for its final, crucial water rinse before cooking. Let's move on to Section 5 and see how this builds. While the rigorous sequence we've been discussing applies super broadly to animal meat, Talmudic scholars absolutely recognize that biology isn't totally uniform, so the law actually accounts for some specific anatomical exceptions that bypass these standard salting laws entirely. The sage Rav Mesharshia actually provides the logical legal premise for these exceptions. He states, one does not presume that there is blood in the intestines, and therefore they are not prohibited if they have not been salted. The logic here is just incredibly direct. The entire purpose of this complex salting procedure is, of course, to extract blood. So, if a specific organ naturally lacks blood in its tissue, well, applying that rigorous washing and salting process to it is totally unnecessary. The law is strictly functional here. Where there's no blood to extract, the extraction protocol is completely waived. So the crucial point is knowing exactly which parts of the anatomy actually qualify for this exemption. And the sages didn't leave this up to guesswork. They provided a finite, highly specific legal list of organs that bypass the standard preparation sequence. Because their tissues naturally lack blood, the rectum, the intestines, and the spiral colon are completely exempt from the mandatory salting process. Literally, they can be prepared and cooked without going through any of that coarse salt extraction we outlined earlier. As we wrap up this explainer, it's really worth taking a step back. We've just analyzed a series of highly specific, ancient instructions, everything from the exact sequence of washing and salting to the precise grain size of the salt, all the way to the anatomical exemptions of the intestines and spiral colon. And I want to leave you with this to consider. How do these ancient, hyper-specific texts continue to define modern kitchen realities today? Because every single piece of kosher meat sold today has undergone this exact procedure. These aren't just dry historical laws, they're living culinary operations that are literally shaping dietary practices worldwide right now. Thanks so much for joining me for this breakdown.